You! How dare you ruin my wedding?
Ma'am, I am so sorry.
Sorry isn't enough. Get out!
Everyone, please remain calm.
She screamed it loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, which was, by the count of the concierge who later told this story to his wife, and then to his sister, and then to anyone who would sit still long enough, somewhere in the range of 40 people. 40 people who heard a woman in a cream silk dress and $4,000 worth of highlighted hair point at a woman in a plain grey housecoat pushing a linen trolley and say, "Get that maid out of this lobby right now. I will not have staff in this space while my guests are arriving. I don't care whose rule it is." And then the elevator behind her opened, and the man she was engaged to walked out of it, and the first thing he did, before he greeted a single one of his arriving guests, before he acknowledged his fiancée at all, was cross the lobby toward the woman with the linen trolley, take both her hands in his, and say, "Mama, you didn't have to come down. I would have come up to find you." The lobby went very quiet. The fiancé went the kind of still that happens when the body understands something the mind is not yet ready to process. The concierge, who had worked that property for 11 years, looked carefully at a spot on the far wall and committed himself, professionally and permanently, to having seen nothing. Let me tell you about a woman named Rosalie Fontenot, who had raised the most eligible bachelor in 3 states in a 2-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner's while working shifts that started before the sun and ended after her son was already asleep, and who had come to her son's hotel that morning not to make a point to anyone, but to leave fresh towels in the linen storage on the 3rd floor, the way she had been doing, quietly, every Tuesday for the past 2 years, because old habits and old love are not things that stop when the money comes. This is not her story of owning anything. This is her story of being worth everything. Hold on to that. We are going to come back to it. To understand why a woman who could spend every Tuesday morning anywhere she wanted still showed up to a hotel linen closet with a trolley, you have to go back, all the way back to a building on Decatur Street that smelled like pressed steam from 7 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, and a woman who raised her son to understand that work was not something that happened to you on the way to becoming something else. Work was the thing itself. Work was what you gave to the world before it gave anything back. Rosalie Fontenot came to the city at 22 with a son on her hip and no other architecture to build from except the belief her own mother had drilled into her, that a woman who shows up earns, and a woman who earns eventually owns, and a woman who owns does not forget the showing up that got her there. She cleaned hotel rooms for 11 years, not because she lacked ambition, because she had a son, and the hotel was across the street from his school, and the schedule let her walk him there in the morning and be waiting at the corner when the bell rang. She pushed her trolley up and down corridors in grey housekeeping coats, and she counted her hours and she banked what she could, and she raised Mathieu Fontenot to understand the smell of clean linen and the weight of a mop handle and the difference between a room that was technically serviced and a room that was genuinely cared for. When Mathieu was 11, she told him, folding a fitted sheet with the hospital corner she had never lost the habit of, that one day he was going to own a hotel and he was going to remember every person who pushed a trolley through it. Not so he could thank them from a distance, she said, snapping the sheet straight, but so he'd know which corners they cut when they were tired and which ones they never cut no matter what, because a man who runs a hotel without knowing that doesn't actually know what he's running. He had believed her, the way children believe mothers who say things over fitted sheets, completely and without reservation. She gave him one thing on the day he signed the papers for his first property acquisition, not a card, not a speech, but the original laminated ID card from her first hotel housekeeping job, photographed in the way those cards always photograph people, badly and honestly, a young woman in a grey coat with a trolley behind her, and the particular look of someone who has decided that wherever she is standing is exactly where she intends to be. She'd kept it in her purse for 23 years. She said, "You carry that, so you always know the name on the deed used to be the name on the coat. Don't ever let anyone forget that, starting with yourself." Mathieu had carried it ever since, in the inside pocket of every suit he'd ever owned. Now hold that thought, because it is going to unravel everything before this script is through. He had built, over 17 years, starting from the single property his mother's savings had anchored the financing of, and she would never hear him acknowledge without correcting him on the terms, a hotel group that now ran 14 properties across 2 continents. He had a reputation in the industry for walking his own properties without announcement, for knowing which corridors had lighting problems and which kitchens ran slow on a Thursday dinner service, and for the particular habit, noticed and remarked upon by every general manager who'd ever worked for him, of greeting housekeeping staff by name when he passed them in the halls. His managers had learned, early, that a Fontenot property ran the way it did because the man who owned it had grown up watching his mother push a trolley through one, and he had never decided that this was something to move past. He had met Claudette Beauchamp 14 months ago at an industry gala, and she was everything the room thought it was looking at when it looked at someone who belonged at an industry gala. Elegant, connected, the daughter of a family whose name opened the kind of doors that the Fontenot name had spent 17 years earning its way through a different entrance of. She was charming and clever, and had the particular confidence of someone raised to believe that rooms organized themselves around her presence, which was true in most rooms she had entered in her life, and which had never, until this Tuesday morning, failed to be true. She did not know about Rosalie. Mathieu had spoken of his mother warmly and often, but in the way people speak of someone they love when they are not yet certain the person they are with will understand the love correctly. Claudette had assembled a picture of Rosalie Fontenot from the warmth of those references that was fond and vague and involved a comfortable woman who had sacrificed for her son and was now, presumably, comfortable. She had not asked a follow-up question sharp enough to find the woman who still showed up on Tuesdays with a trolley because she loved the smell of clean linen and the particular satisfaction of a correctly stocked closet, and because her son's hotel was 4 stops on the train from her apartment, and she liked to stay in the practice of showing up. The morning of the engagement celebration arrival, Claudette had come down to the lobby 2 hours early to manage the first impressions her guests would receive, which was a thing she did, because first impressions were something she understood in a structural way, as levers, which meant she was in the lobby when the elevator from the service corridor opened and a woman in a grey housecoat pushed a linen trolley across the marble floor toward the 3rd floor storage access. And Claudette had not looked at the woman's face before she made her calculation, because the calculation had already been made before the elevator opened, by decades of understanding that a woman in a grey coat pushing a trolley in a hotel lobby is staff, and staff should not be in the main lobby when important guests are arriving. She had screamed it, the way people scream things they are not examining while they scream them. "Get that maid out of this lobby right now. I will not have staff in this space while my guests are arriving." And then the elevator behind her opened, and Mathieu walked out. Now watch close, because this is the part 40 people in a hotel lobby all remember differently, but all remember completely. He crossed the lobby without hesitation. He took his mother's hands. He said what he said. And then he turned, and he looked at his fiancée across 15 feet of marble floor that his mother's decade of labor had, in the most direct ancestral sense, made possible. And he did not raise his voice, and he did not perform any of what happened next for the lobby, because he was not a man who performed things for rooms. He simply said, "Claudette, this is my mother, Rosalie Fontenot. She worked hotel housekeeping for 11 years while raising me alone, and she still comes on Tuesdays because she believes in staying in the practice of the thing that built you. She is the reason I know what a correctly stocked linen closet looks like, and the reason I know which corners a tired housekeeper cuts, and the reason I understood, at 11 years old, exactly what I wanted to build and how it ought to be run. She is the most important woman in any room she walks into. I would like you to know that now, before anything else this morning." Claudette said nothing. The lobby said nothing. The concierge studied the far wall with the focused attention of a man writing a story in his memory while it was still happening. Rosalie looked at her son for a moment with the expression of a woman who has not needed anyone to defend her for a very long time, but does not find it unwelcome when the person doing it is the one she raised to understand why. Then she patted his hand, said she was going to finish with the third-floor storage and she'd see him at dinner, and pushed her trolley back toward the service corridor the way she always did. Not because she had been asked to, because she had come to do a job, and she was not the kind of woman who left a job unfinished because a lobby had decided to make a moment out of it. Here is what the audience understands now that Claudette, in all her assembled, early morning certainty, did not. She had not screamed at a maid. She had screamed at the mother of the man who owned the building, the woman who had made the first investment in it, whose laminated ID photograph was in the inside pocket of her fiancé's jacket at that exact moment. The woman whose 11 years of grey housekeeping coats had taught the man Claudette wanted to marry everything he knew about what a hotel was supposed to feel like from the inside. She had made her calculation before she looked at the face, and the calculation had shown her exactly what she was willing to see. That was the thing Mathieu could not move past, not the screaming. He had encountered screaming in his life, and knew it for the frightened, cornered thing it mostly was. It was the not looking, the decision, made before the elevator finished opening, that the face did not matter because the coat had already told the story. He had grown up in that coat. His understanding of every room he'd ever walked into had come from the woman who wore it, and the person he had been considering building a life with had looked at the coat and decided, in the same breath, that whatever was inside it did not require her eyes. He told her this, later, quietly, in the private dining room where the engagement celebration had been relocated and then quietly dismantled over the course of a conversation that lasted 2 hours and produced no version of itself that could be repaired. He did not say it as an accusation. He said it as the truth of what he'd seen, the same way his mother had always said things, plainly and without the drama of pretending they were smaller than they were. Claudette said she hadn't known. He said he understood that. He said the not knowing wasn't what he kept coming back to. It was the not looking. She didn't have an answer for that. There wasn't one. Now the narrator has to tell you what balance looks like when it finally comes back around. It does not always look like justice. Sometimes it looks like clarity. Sometimes it looks like a man who has spent 17 years building something his mother's labor made possible, standing in a lobby, choosing without hesitation or performance which direction he is going to walk. Claudette's family reached for comment in the way families in this city are reached for comment, said nothing publicly, which is a form of comment. Her friends, who had been arriving to celebrate an engagement, found instead a brunch that had been graciously laid on by the hotel's kitchen at the host's instruction, warm and generous, and accompanied by a note from Mathieu, saying that he hoped they would enjoy the morning regardless of the change in plans. He had been raised by a woman who knew that guests in your space are your guests no matter what the morning brings, and he ran his properties accordingly. Rosalie finished stocking the third-floor linen closet, came down to the lobby in the late morning, found her son waiting with coffee the way he always waited, and they walked out of the hotel together into the Tuesday street, the way they had been walking somewhere together since he was small enough to hold her hand crossing it. She had not asked him what he was going to do. She knew her son. She had known him since before he knew himself, which is the specific knowledge of a mother who showed up every morning, and Rosalie Fontenot had never once in her life failed to show up. A quiet woman is not a weak woman. Remember that. Remember it every time the world looks at a grey coat and a linen trolley and decides it already knows the story of the person inside it. He still carries the laminated ID card in his inside pocket, the one from her first housekeeping job, the one with the honest photograph and the grey coat and the trolley behind her. He does not carry it to remind himself of where he came from, though that is part of it. He carries it to remember the look on his mother's face in that photograph, the look of a woman who has decided that wherever she is standing is exactly where she intends to be. He has never met anyone who stood in a room more fully than Rosalie Fontenot. He has been trying, in everything he built, to earn that. If this story reminded you that the woman with the trolley is sometimes the woman who built the whole floor she's pushing it across, type, "She showed up" in the comments so she hears you. Share this with the one person who needs to remember that a grey coat never once told anyone the size of the life inside it. And subscribe, because next time the woman someone screams at in a lobby might just be the reason the lobby is standing at all.